Can you tell, like, what exactly does customer lifetime value mean? I think just with the name alone, we have a pretty general sense, but what exactly does it entail?
It's how much value a customer creates, or a member if you're a credit union, financially, over the life of that relationship. And there are two different ways to look at this. Maybe three. You have the consumer retail relationship, you have the business slash commercial relationship, and then you also have the mortgage relationship. And the reason I said two, maybe three, because mortgage could also then fall under the consumer side. They might have a consumer relationship, i.e., checking account, but then also have a mortgage. But then too, a lot of the research shows that where an entrepreneur has a financial relationship for their business, they also have that relationship as well for their personal side. But take that even further. And I think this is where thinking exponentially comes into play. It's an entrepreneur has a relationship with a financial brand, maybe a community financial brand, then what's the opportunity for that entrepreneur to then go in and create further value for their team by also bringing that community financial brand into that organization to provide coaching for their team members, because we know the impact that financial stress has on employees and how that can negatively impact a business. Much larger conversation for another day. I know you want to bring this back in, so I'm going to pause with that. That's
Yeah.
my
Well,
entrepreneurial mind going down different
yes.
pathways.
Yes, exactly. And I just want to just break this down really one step at a time because I read you made a post on LinkedIn where you went through a calculation to illustrate not only how to find the lifetime value or how to average it out, but what the impact of it is. What does it really mean? Why do we care what our customer lifetime value is? What is the impact on the financial brand itself?
Particularly when it comes to, we'll say, digital growth. Not knowing this number is, it's your flying blind. And that's because you have all of this traffic coming into your website. And let's just focus today's conversation on the consumer side, and maybe we'll come back and do a second conversation on the business side of things. But you have all of this traffic coming into your website. And we know that, particularly say the homepage, 85 to 92% of the visits to the homepage are for people going into online banking. But what about all of the product pages? For checking, for savings products, for loan products. That is potential growth there. And we have, through our own benchmark studies here, identified what conversion rate paths look like for different types of calls to action. And by knowing what customer lifetime value or member lifetime value is, we can begin to make models and projections based upon traffic flow of how much value your website is generating or could potentially generate on one side of the coin. But on the other, it's how much is your website potentially losing that you're not aware of, because we don't even know what customer or member lifetime value is to begin with in the first place.
So how do we calculate this? How do we figure this out? Because we've talked to a lot of marketers and we've asked this question. We'll begin collecting data ahead of conducting any website secret shopping studies. And we ask simply one of the questions is, do you know what the customer lifetime value is? And more often than not, they're unaware.
Yep. And that's where we can go to, we'll just say, general market research for this. And you could take the time and the investment to run the numbers internally. But when we are facilitating a website secret shopping study, we look to a couple of different data sources. And I want to quote them for today's conversation so that those who are watching or listening, if they're thinking about this and they're like, oh, I've never really thought about what customer lifetime value is or what member lifetime value is for a retail account. A couple of data points. YDC Data Economics, your data connect. Customer lifetime value, retail banking case study reports that the average retail customer lifetime value for around $1 billion or so asset community financial brand is right at $2,500. That's for new. And I think it's important to make the distinction here. On the opposite side of the equation, for those account holders who already have an existing relationship or existing customers or existing members, the retail customer lifetime value there is about $3,400. So we need to make the distinction between new relationship versus retained relationship. And it makes a lot of sense because A, it costs less to keep a customer or a member and increase the value of that relationship over time versus going out to acquire new accounts. And coming back to the YDC or the Your Data Connect study here, they report that the average cost to acquire a new account, which I know is another number that people are very interested in benchmarking against, is $824.
Wow.
Yeah.
And yeah, and when you think about, I reference this a lot, but it's such a great book to read, Joey Coleman's Never Lose a Customer Again. And when you think about how many new accounts or how many people leave their bank or their credit union within the first 90 days, the data, the stats are insane. And if you're paying $850 for a new account and they're leaving you in less than 100 days,
Yep.
and most of them within the first, what is it, 90 or is it less than that?
I think it's less than that from Joey's research. And it's interesting that Joey opened up the book with this banking anecdote.
He
And
did.
you take some of this and you cross reference this against what we have seen out in the wild or out in the real world. I know of one community financial institution that we have been facilitating website secret shopping studies for a couple of years. They are not necessarily struggling with acquisition. Reported challenge is retention because they shared with us that as quickly as they are acquiring new accounts, they are then losing that same number through either direct closing accounts or we'll just call them ghost accounts. And I think that right there, it's an important distinction to make when we're thinking about modeling this out. Because if we look at the average lifetime customer value or the average lifetime member value being around $2,500, and there's a couple of other data points too that I want to pause on just for context because I think it's important to look at not just one study but to look at a few different ones. Oliver Wyman reports that the average lifetime value for new customers, once again through their insights, is $4,500. So they actually
Wow.
increase from $2,500 for new customers or new members up to $4,500 for new
Wow.
customers and new members. And they're also reporting that the average cost of acquisition for a new retail customer is about $750. So pretty close to what YDC is reporting there. And so if we can take those two different data points, you've got 4,000 on the high end,
Mhm.
4,500 on the high end, 2,500 on the low end. What if we just average those out and said can we agree, and this is what we do when we're secret shopping websites, can we just agree that the average lifetime value of a new account is, we'll just say $3,500, split the difference. And if we're in
Yeah.
agreement with that, then we can continue to run our benchmarks to help a financial brand determine how much they are presently losing on their website.
Yeah, and I think it paints such a different picture when you think, first of all, so many different marketers that we're talking to don't know the abandon rate. They don't even know, and that's no disrespect. It's just not something that's necessarily commonly talked about. And in general, we know that a lot of the marketers that we talk to don't have the time to sift through this data. They're just so busy doing everything else that requires of them. Not knowing this number, it's okay. And I think that's what we're here for, is to help bring awareness to this. To
It's
what happened?
it's not even the. I think we need to pump the brakes. I'm gonna steal your word on this one. We need to pump the brakes for a moment because it's not just abandonment rate here. We have to look at this as in the context of a funnel or a journey because and I'll use some hypothetical numbers here. Let's just say you have 10,000 people coming to a particular product page on your website. Out of that 10,000 people, we know that around 30% of them at the higher end of the spectrum, down to only about 3.5%, are going to click on a primary call to action. And that primary call to action is when someone is ready to apply for or open an account. And so if I've got my pen here, I'm going to just do some quick math. So if you've got 10,000 people coming to a product page, and when I say you have this range of 30% on the high end to 3.5% on the low end, that is actually because based upon where the CTA falls on the page will directly impact what the percentage of that click through rate is. And this is why when we facilitate these website secret shopping studies, sometimes we have found, and we've talked about this before on other podcasts, CTAs being on the bottom of the page, low to no click through rate. On the opposite end of the spectrum, the common logic and the obvious is you put the CTA at the top of the page. But if it's only at the top of the page, in the middle of the page, not at the bottom of the page, once again, we are losing clicks to apply.
Yeah, multiple conversion points.
Exactly. And not getting too far down into the weeds with that, I want to stick with just we're going to use the 30% here. So 30% of people out of 10,000, that's 3,000 people click on the CTA to apply. But the story doesn't end because then, back to your point, this is where the abandonment comes in. Does that mean that all 3,000 of those people are going to actually complete the application? No, because we can look at anywhere between a 60 to an 85% abandonment on the application itself. And so if you take 3,000 people who start this, 85% of them abandon. And I'm going to do some really rough math. So it's about 850 for every 1,000. So what is that? 2,500 more or less. I'm doing some rough
I'm
math.
I'm gonna trust your math on this one.
Yeah, I'm just doing some really rough math and I don't have the calculator. And we are in the age of AI. So I probably could just ask the AI to facilitate all of this for me. But we'll just say 2,500. So now 2,500 people have abandoned the application
Because it's the friction, lack of understanding.
because of some level, we'll just call it complexity, because of some level of complexity within the application. And once again, this is where the secret shopping studies help to identify what these friction points are. So when now it's okay, if you say, oh, our abandonment rate is 85%, what does that really mean?
Paint the picture.
Right. Oh, our abandonment rate, oh, we lost 2,500 people this month on one specific product line application. I think that's the other way that we have to look at this because we're just talking about one specific product or one specific product line. So then you take 8,500 people, not 85, 2,500 people, and now we come back to our lifetime value. And what did we say? It was like, we're going to say $3,500. So you take 2,500 abandoned applications times 3,500. Now that's $8.7 million in lost revenue and lost lifetime value.